At the beginning of this course, we looked at why enterprise AI projects fail. And if you remember, one of the things that we talked about that we can learn from the companies whose AI initiatives did not go well is that their data was not ready for AI. We've got to be honest about the state of our data. Even if you can access it, it's likely messy. It might be locked away in some outdated legacy systems that maybe is not talking to some of the more modern day tools. It could be full of errors, or it could be scattered across all sorts of different departments in random spreadsheets. So a huge part of any AI project at the beginning is just cleaning and labeling and organizing all your data so that the AI can understand it. Now, this process can be time consuming, expensive, and it's frequently underestimated by leaders. So how do we tackle this without being completely overwhelmed? Today, we're going to use a 3-step data readiness audit. It's very lightweight, and it's something that we put together for you so that you can start tomorrow. But it is designed to give you a solid data readiness strategy as a leader. Here's our agenda. We're going to identify exactly what data you have, who owns it, and I'll show you how to assess the quality of that data by doing surveys and interviews with the people on your team. And then we're going to figure out which of those data sets, because you don't have to clean them all, which ones you're going to clean first so that you don't waste time scrubbing data that you may not even need. And by the way, as a leader, this is not a process you're going to do yourself. You're not going to conduct this audit by yourself, but your job is going to be to delegate this to your team. And so this lesson and all of the accompanying handouts in your learning guide are designed so that we can give you the high-level understanding, the stuff that you need to oversee the process and ask the right questions. So step 1 is getting clear on 3 things. What do we have? Where does it live? And who's responsible for it? So the first artifact that we've put in your learning guide is a page called Dataset and Owner's Map. All you're doing here is creating a 1-page view that helps you as the leader identify all your major data assets, the systems or the storage location where they live, and who owns each one. Now, when you think about data in a company, there are a lot of different forms. You've got customer data, which would be your CRM records and email marketing and all the different social media followers, lead lists, support tickets, even NPS surveys. This is basically anything that pertains to a current customer or a customer that you would like to have in the future. You've got financial and sales data, the money piece, the record of all your financial exchanges. So POs, price lists, pricing for your products and services, commission calculators, department budgets. You've got operational data, which is the doing part, so project management, delivery timelines. Employee data, basically similar to the customer part, it's people, but now it's all the people that are in your personnel records. You've got your products and services data, so your spec sheets, your product roadmaps. If you're in a service business, this might be your scope of work templates and all the methodologies of how you deliver your services. You've got internal documentation, all the stuff that's stored in those shared drives and those wikis, training manuals, brand guides, all the different documents that your team is using all day. And then, of course, you've got government and compliance data. So that's your policies, your rules and regulations, trademarks, patents would be included there, and external data, third-party data. So this is the stuff that you don't necessarily own, but whatever your business is, you're using it to influence your work. So like, for example, real estate people, they're going to be looking at real estate trends or competitor pricing, industry standards. If you deliver something, your delivery drivers are looking at weather forecasts, right? That is all third-party external data. Now, all of these forms of input come in 2 formats. This is very important to understand because you're going to be talking about this a lot as you think about preparing your data. You've got structured data. That's the stuff that fits in a predefined format. Tables, rows, columns. It's neat and presentable. It's in an Excel spreadsheet, basically, right? So you can count it, you can sort it, and you can incorporate it into dashboards and reports very, very easily. Unstructured data is the stuff that doesn't really fit in a fixed format. That's your PDFs, your text, your images, audio and video recordings. It is a lot messier, but it's often more insightful if you clean it up because it has all the narrative, the sentiments and the nuances, the proprietary stuff that's not captured in rows and columns. So getting back to your asset and owner's worksheet, you want to note who owns each piece, and we recommend that you break this down into 3 different roles. So an executive sponsor is just more of a senior leader who's overseeing that data asset. They probably secure the budget for it, and they may remove any roadblocks that the team who reports to them might have. Whereas the data steward, that's the day-to-day, the custodian, the person who's actually maintaining the data entries and fixing errors. This is usually more of an operational or a technical role. And then, of course, there's space there for you to also indicate who are the primary users. Is there a key team or a certain department that's heavily relying on this data? So why do we need clear ownership? Because we want to be able to see, is there confusion or is there silos? Is there a certain person who might own too many pieces of data? Clear ownership prevents confusion and makes sure that people are accountable whenever issues come up. Now, speaking of ownership, once you've identified all those people, you move on to step number 2. And that's where you're going to assess the quality of that data. That's when you decide, hey guys, is our data good enough for our business to proceed with AI? And if not, where are all the red flags? So you're going to measure this across 6 different dimensions. Accuracy. Is it error-free? Completeness. Are there gaps or missing values? Consistency. Is the data saying the same thing everywhere that it's used? So is there a customer listed as John Smith in one database and Jay Smith in another? Or finance is calling something net sales, but marketing calls it revenue. That's an inconsistency in how the data is not only defined, but how it's formatted. Timeliness. Is the data up to date or is it old and irrelevant? Accessibility. Can the people who need it get to it easily? If it's locked in a silo, if it's only accessible by a single IT person, that's going to be a risk. So you're looking at stuff like login permissions and who can view it, who can edit it, and then your ownership, which, as you defined on the first worksheet, that's figuring out who that executive sponsor is that's actually accountable, usually a department head, and then who's the data steward that's going to actually handle the entry and the cleaning up. If nobody is owning the data, your audit will reveal those problems. So you might be thinking, do I need a big consulting study to do a data audit? Usually no. You can get a nice read on your data readiness just with a few very lightweight methods. Usually a short survey or some one-on-one conversations, some interviews with the people on your team who use the data. That's usually going to surface 80% of the pain points. In your learning guide, we've given you a survey question bank with some examples of what you might ask people. It covers all 6 of those dimensions, plus how to score them. There's also another bank of interview questions if you want to go that route. And there's facilitators guides for the person who would be conducting those surveys or interviews. You can also ask for some existing artifacts or evidence like database schemas or dictionaries. And we've given you in your learning guide a list of some possible artifacts to review. Most organizations have at least some of these artifacts about data on paper, so that'll help you to validate what you heard in those interviews or surveys. How do you choose a method for this? If your goal is that you just want simple, use a survey. If your stakeholders prefer open discussions and that's kind of part of your culture, you can get a lot richer insights if you use the interview method, but you could also just combine them. So, talking to people, looking at artifacts, that's usually enough to get you a minimum viable data audit, okay? This is also an area where I recommend using an AI interviewer like Dactic, which is the tool that we offer at Valere. AI interviewers help so much with an audit because, first of all, it completely removes the scheduling bottleneck. You no longer have to have a manager who sits in 10 different one-hour meetings to get this information. Your team of interviewees can participate whenever they want, whenever it fits their schedule. And then when they're done, the AI is going to instantly synthesize that mass of data far faster than any human eyes could. So you're getting an evidence-based report with all those friction points being presented to you. An important safety note, if you are not using Dactic and you're going to conduct your interviews the old-fashioned way, like with a Zoom call or a Google Meet recording, and you want to use AI to synthesize the transcripts for you, do not use a public LLM that you don't own unless you first go through and redact the sensitive company information. So we've got a section in your learning guide where it's called de-identifying sensitive data for LLM analysis, and that's going to help you go through that process of redacting sensitive information. Then you move on to the next step, which is scoring your findings. So step 3 is figure out what your data audit has revealed. So to do this, we've given you a data audit scorecard that we provided in your learning guide. It's just got some simple fillable sections in this worksheet that is going to let you pull all your results into one place. Whether they came from an interview or a survey, however you collected them, you'll fill this out as a simple table. And for each item, you'll note the data asset you measured, say customer data, the dimension that you assessed, like let's say completeness, and then the score it received. So maybe it got a low score of 2, okay? Then you'll capture all your observations with some concrete evidence, such as a lot of missing emails, 30% of the fields were left blank. So you would write that in the observation column. And then after that, you can document some of the corrective actions that you are proposing. And tying back to the earlier step where we identified owners, you're going to assign who's responsible for carrying out that corrective action. So you've done the data hygiene audit. You've probably discovered, like most teams do, okay, my data's a little bit messy. Does that mean you need to stop everything and spend the next 6 months cleaning all the spreadsheets before you can even touch AI? Absolutely not. Your next phase is the data remediation plan. And the good news is you only go through the effort of cleaning your highest priority data sets, the ones that are tied to your preferred AI use case. So to reinforce what we learned in a previous lesson, we were talking about AI assessment and planning and why that assessment first mindset matters so much. You're not just picking your AI use cases in the shower. We do that proper assessment process so that we can come up with a short list of use cases that are tied to a concrete business impact. So now that you have that short list, the first step of data remediation is to do a data fitness check, okay? So I've given you this matrix, and I want to explain how this data fitness check works. This is in your learning guide. Before you clean anything, you would plot each of your use cases on this matrix. And that way you know which projects are green lights and which ones might get you in a little bit of a data mess. The vertical axis is data dependency. So how much does the AI solution need your unique internal records to work? The horizontal axis is data quality. Based on your hygiene audit, how clean and accessible is the data? Now, one note about scoring, you're not going to average your scores across different data sets or different dimensions. Instead, you want to look for the weakest link and score the use case based on that. For example, let's say that a use case needs both your sales records and they score a score of 5, but it also needs customer feedback and those notes score a 2. Well, then that use case is a 2. Because AI is only as strong as the messiest data that you feed it. Okay, so you want to use your weakest link to score it. On the top right, if your use case lands here, you're in good shape. That means that the AI needs your data and the data is clean. This is your highest ROI. This is really like your most defensible project. It will usually give you a strategic moat. So I would say green light if you find your project there. But if you're in the bottom right corner, it might get you a quick win. But even though you have healthy data here, the AI is not really using it. It's just using some general logic. So it doesn't really need your data anyway. The bottom left quadrant, I would say, okay, sure, your data is a little bit messy, but AI doesn't really need it either. So that would be a safe place to experiment, but it's not going to give you much of a competitive moat, but it is safe. All right. And if you find yourself in the top left, that is going to be the worst place of all because we call that the data debt trap. The AI really needs all your secret records for it to be smart, but all your data is in really rough shape. So that does not mean that you're stuck there. You want to either now rethink the scope of the use case or you would hit pause and work through the next step, which is data remediation. Okay, so that's what we're going to do next. Step 3 is process controls and you're going to fix forward. Okay. So our first job before we go cleaning up our data is we want to stop the bleeding. We want to stop any new dirty data from happening at the point of entry, and we want that to start today. So here's what this would look like. We would do this by installing like a little digital stop sign. So let's say that in your system, the lead source is an open text box, and one salesperson types LinkedIn, another person types linked -in, and maybe somebody else types social. Well, to an AI, those are 3 different sources. So process controls would be for somebody to go in to your system and replace that open text box with a drop-down menu to standardize that input. Or another example would be like if you have a problem with a lot of missing data and the text box for it was optional before, now you would just go in and set that as a required field. So you're fixing the process so that your users are never going to make that error again, but it's fixing it forward, okay? And then step 4 is the targeted cleanup where you fix backward. You're going to clean backwards, but only the slice of data that you actually need. Because you followed the process up to this point, you can make an informed decision on what you're going to clean, and it's not going to be your whole database, okay? So for example, we had a construction firm that came to us, and they were sitting on 10 terabytes of data. They had decades of, building codes and engineering specs, and if they had tried to clean all 10 terabytes, they'd probably still be working on that today. So instead of going all the way back to the beginning of time, you want to pick what is the specific window that's relevant to this business problem I'm trying to solve in this use case. And you're going to clean that slice, which is the whole point of why we went through this process. All right. What do we actually clean? Well, it depends on the data set and the use case, but what I would say as a general rule of thumb is that you always want to clean fields that do one of these jobs. So they identify and link records, so IDs, customer names, account matching, product codes. Also things that are driving a decision, so maybe the 5 to 20 fields that this use case is actually going to need. Anything that's defining an outcome, so labels, categories, resolution codes, statuses and reasons. This is where a lot of AI projects kind of die off, is because the why is missing. And then anything that controls risks, so permission sensitive fields, compliance tags, retention rules, everything else can wait. Now let's wrap up this section. First, your discussion assignment. To get credit for this course, remember you have to answer the discussion assignment. So you want to answer these 2 prompts just by leaving a comment on this lesson. Just look for the comment button. And you want to say, one thing that I learned today that I didn't know before about how my data impacts my AI implementation is. And then the second thing is the specific data related action that I want to concentrate on first is. So go ahead and fill that out, and I'll see you in the next lesson.